A Winter Adventure by Richard Brightfield, illustrated by Steve Atoll. A Winter Adventure. This is a chapter book, and it has 3 chapters. Chapter 1. Off they go. What are your plans for today? Mr. Sanchez asked his son Carlos. I'm hiking with my nature club, Carlos said. From the state park to entrance to Turtle Lake. Jimmy's father, Mr. Gordon, is going with us. It's colder than yesterday, his mother said. Please take your warmest jacket and your gloves. Hold on, Carlos' father said. I need to get your warm blue jacket from the storage crate in the attic. Then I'll drop you off. A short time later, Carlos met up with Mr. Gordon and the other members of the club, Jimmy, Julie, and Tyrone. Mr. Gordon packed them in his van and drove them to the state park. When they arrived, he checked his compass. The old lodging trail is somewhere directly west of here, he said. There's his van. This is it, Mr. Gordon said. A short time later, we'll follow the trail to the lake. They continued on into the pine forest. Pine trees are my favorite, Mr. Gordon said. They stay green all winter. Also, they saved the early settlers. How did they do that? Tyrone asked. The Native Americans taught the settlers how to make pine needle tea, Mr. Gordon said. This kept the settlers from getting a disease called scurvy. They had been hiking for an hour or so when Jimmy pointed excitedly ahead. Look, there's a roof or something falling sideways on the trail, he exclaimed. Maybe the house got ruined in the storm. Mr. Gordon laughed. That's a lean-to, he said. We'll stop there to rest. They all sat on a branch in front of the lean-to. This is probably the simplest structure known to man, Mr. Gordon said. It's a good shelter during a summer storm. It doesn't give much protection in the winter, though. Just then, a gust of wind blew by. Whoa, it's getting colder, said Tyrone. Yes, said Carlo. It's colder now than before. Look up. The clouds have covered the sun. We still have a long way to go, said Mr. Gordon. We will keep warm by walking. They started on the trail again. A few snowflakes began to fall. It's snowing, Jimmy said. Maybe we should start back. It's just a flurry, said Tyrone. But a few minutes later, the snow began coming down heavily. Chapter 2. The Big Blizzard. I think it's time for me to make a phone call, Mr. Gordon said. He took out his cell phone and called Julie's mother. It's snowing up here, he said. This blizzard is a surprise. I listened to the weather report, but didn't hear anything about an upcoming storm. I'll let the other parents know, she said. Mr. Gordon could barely hear her. Don't worry, we'll be fine, he shouted into the phone. The snow started coming down so hard that they could barely see the trail or even the trees. It was a real blizzard. We need to find some shelter, Julie said. Let's build an igloo, said Carlo. I read about building one in a book. That sounds like a good idea, Mr. Gordon said. Mr. Gordon pulled a tape measure from his pack and handed it to Julie. I'll put you in charge of the measurements, he said. The wall of the fort should be circular, about 6 feet across and 3 feet high. Make it 1.5 feet thick. The measurements don't have to be exact, but should be close. Snow is really coming down. We'll get started, she said. We have to leave a small opening on one side, Carlos said as he started building. Mr. Gordon went toward the nearest tree and cut off some of the lowest branches with his hunting knife. He separated them into 2 bunches and then carried each bunch to the rapidly rising snow fort. When Julie said it was high enough, he and Tyrone started laying the branches across the top. They were determined to make a perfect roof. Everybody's working together. Great teamwork, said Mr. Gordon. It's time to go in. One by one, they crawled into the igloo. Mr. Gordon had a flashlight. It lit it up the inside. They sat with their backs against the wall. It's not the largest fort I've ever seen, but it's cozy, Mr. Gordon said. We'll wait out the blizzard. This is great, Julie said. We'll call it Carlos's igloo because it was his idea to build it. You're all inside. The sleigh ride. A while later, Mr. Gordon's phone rang. It was Carlos' father. I'm at the State Park Great House, he said. Where are you? We're on the old lodging trail, a few miles due west of the Great House, Mr. Gordon said. Luckily, Mr. Sanchez also had a compass. Okay, he said. I'm coming in to get you. Time to see what the outside world looks like, Mr. Gordon said. There's Mr. Sanchez on the phone. They all climbed out. Around them was a wonderful world of white. It's really beautiful, Julie exclaimed. A short time later, they heard a sound of a motor coming toward them. It was Carlos' father on a snowmobile. He was pulling an old-fashioned sleigh. That looks fun. Everybody jumped on board. He said, there's hot cider back at the gatehouse. Cool, said Carlo. I think we're the luckiest kids alive. When they got back to the gatehouse, Julie's and Tyrone's parents were waiting. Everyone was safe and happy. It's all because of Carlos' igloo, said Julie. The end of Winter Adventure.